Hi, my name is Ivy. And for months, I thought the files on Point Pleasant were finally closed. Every tourist leaves with a t-shirt and a smile, but nobody talks about what happens when the festival lights go out and the woods get quiet. Do you think the monster ever really left? Subscribe right now and let me show you what's scratching at my window.
A 12-foot stainless steel statue with glowing red eyes stands guard on 4th Street in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and thousands of tourists line up every September just to touch its metal toes. I've turned the final pages of this file under the amber glow of my reading lamp, and I still can't decide if the monument is meant to ward off the dark or invite it back. When a creature born of terror becomes a t-shirt, a festival mascot, and a roadside attraction, what happens to the dread that birthed it in the winter of 1966? If you walk down Main Street today, the shadow of the red-eyed apparition doesn't hide in the cornfields anymore. It lives on neon signs, coffee mugs, and the glossy covers of paperbacks stacked neatly behind glass display cases. Jeff Wamsley opened the Mothman Museum right there in town, filling small rooms with yellowed newspaper clippings, movie props, and handmade puppets of a winged terror. I remember when those clippings were damp police reports and frantic phone calls to the sheriff. Now they're laminated, they're framed. Tourists buy refrigerator magnets shaped like glowing red eyes while eating pancakes shaped like moth wings. The terror has been neatly packaged, fitted with a gift bow, and sold back to the curious souls who drive hundreds of miles just to say they stood where it happened. Yet, beneath the festival tents and the brass bands of the annual Mothman Festival, the locals know something the souvenir shops can't capture. The laughter of the crowds on a crisp September afternoon feels a bit too loud, like children whistling past a graveyard after dark. Thousands descend upon the town square for costume contests and guided walks across the river wearing cardboard wings and antennas. They come searching for a thrill, a modern ghost story they can photograph for their screens. But late at night, when the tourists have cleared out and the neon signs flicker off, the steel statue stands alone in the dark, and 4th Street grows remarkably quiet. I sat across from a local shopkeeper last autumn who watched the festival crowds drift away from her shop window. She didn't buy a t-shirt, and she didn't wear the antenna headband. She just told me that every town needs a myth to hold its history together, whether that history is made of light or iron. Point Pleasant wrapped its arms around a tragedy and a mystery and spun them into an identity that refuses to fade. They took the unnameable thing from the TNT area and gave it a face, a festival, and a permanent home in the town square. It is a brilliant magic trick performed by an entire community, turning a nightmare into a tradition. And yet, as I trace my finger over the old photographs from 1966 resting on my desk, I wonder if the creature cares about its bronze likeness. Myths do not need permission to outlive the people who first saw them. When the festival ends and the confetti is swept from the pavement, the bridge is still gone. The river still runs dark and deep beneath the hills, and the woods out by the abandoned igloos remain as silent and heavy as they were 50 years ago. The town built a tourist destination to keep the legend caged in plain sight, but a cage made of gift shops and stainless steel might not be as strong as they think. I've watched the way people look up at those red eyes in the photographs, looking for a sign that it was all just a massive, collective fever dream. But the tourist brochures don't mention the cold drafts that still sweep through the alleys when the river fog rolls in off the Ohio. They don't write about the visitors who go walking down the abandoned munitions roads after dark, hoping for a glimpse of something real, only to find themselves running back to their cars when a twig snaps in the brush. The commercialization tries to tame the dark, but the dark has a stubborn way of ignoring the gift shop hours. The books are written, the documentaries have played on late-night television, and Hollywood has taken its turn molding the wings into cinematic gold. Everyone has an opinion on what stood by the cornfield that night. Some call it an owl, some call it mass hysteria, and others call it a messenger of doom. But the sheer volume of stories only pulls us further into the labyrinth. Every novel and movie adds another layer of myth, burying the actual November night beneath decades of folklore and pop culture gloss. Which brings me back to the question that has haunted every single page of this investigation since the very first whistle blew across the valley. If a legend becomes a tourist attraction, does it lose its power to frighten us, or does it simply hide in the gift bags, waiting for the right moment to unfold its wings? I thought I knew the answer when I opened this file case months ago, but as I look toward the window and watch the shadows stretch across my study, I realize the file isn't closed at all. Something is scratching at the glass.
Let's talk plainly about where this leaves us, because I've read every police log, every eyewitness transcript, and every tourist pamphlet ever printed about Point Pleasant. If you ask me for my honest verdict, after turning the last page of this entire archive, here is where I land. I don't believe for a second that a giant red-eyed bird was born from the chemical runoff of the TNT bunkers, and I don't believe the entire town hallucinated out of sheer collective grief after the tragedy of the Silver Bridge. But I also don't think it was just an oversized sandhill crane playing tricks on frightened teenagers. The skeptics want a clean, tidy explanation, a misidentified great horned owl distorted by headlights and rural paranoia. It is a neat, comforting theory that lets everyone sleep safely at night. But the skeptics ignore the sheer consistency of the terror in the voices of the people who were there, people who spent decades refusing to embellish their stories, because the memory alone still unsettled them. On the other hand, the true believers want every shadow in the Ohio Valley to be a supernatural omen, tying every single unexplained blip to an ancient curse. That, too, feels a bit too convenient, a way to dress up random tragedy in Gothic theater. My read on it is stranger than both camps care to admit. Point Pleasant didn't just witness a monster in the winter of 1966. The town collided with something ancient that was already sleeping in the soil, something that took the shape of their deepest anxieties and gave them wings. The monster was real enough to break the quiet of a West Virginia highway, but it was shaped by the minds of the people who looked up and stared back. And once a town feeds a myth like that with fear, memory, and eventually tourism, it stops belonging to the realm of ordinary biology. It becomes part of the landscape. So tell me, knowing the wreckage, the sightings, the media frenzy, and the bronze statue that now stands in the town square, do you really think the Mothman was ever just a creature of flesh and bone? Or did the people of Point Pleasant accidentally create something permanent out of the dark? Tell me I'm wrong, and leave your theory in the comments below. I read every single one, and I'm eager to see if you think the cage of pop culture ever really trapped it. Because as I sit here closing the cover of this final volume, listening to the quiet settling over my study, I am reminded that folklore never truly dies. It simply changes costumes. It swaps out whispered warnings in diner booths for neon signs and festival booths, waiting patiently for someone to wander just a little too far off the paved path. The files on West Virginia are sealed at last, and the festival lights in Point Pleasant have finally gone out for the season. But as I put out my reading candle and listen to the wind rattling the glass against the frame, I can hear a low, rhythmic beating of wings high above the chimney. The file on the Mothman is back on the shelf. But out in the dark woods where the river bends, something is waking up for the night, and I think it's looking for a new town to visit. I'll save a seat for you when the next case lands on the desk. Until then, keep the lights burning.